Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Crypto Economy Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Frank Holmes here from Hive to tell you a little bit about Bitcoin mining and what it's like to operate a company that is securing the Bitcoin network and making it more accessible to all of us. So, thank you so much, Frank, for coming on the show today.
It's great to share my story with you.
I'm looking forward to it. And I guess we can jump right in. I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about like how you discovered crypto and blockchain and what brought you to, running one of the largest firms in the industry. And if, mining in particular was something that interested you and why.
Well, I'm a fund manager, money manager that has a global reputation for gold and gold mining and financing gold mining companies, in particular royalty companies. Royalty companies enjoy much more revenue in their structure than a gold mining company. And so Hive's original structure was to try to emulate a SaaS or a royalty company model. And uh, and so we've always had the highest revenue per employee in the industry. I had launched an ETF that's called Jets, and it was very, very popular, especially what they call the digital nomads that are flying all over the world and coding and doing podcasts and interviews, and that was a big success. And I was then saying, I need to get into Bitcoin because I knew about the world of gold, but I realized in 2017 it wasn't going to happen because the big bad bogeyman was KYC and AML. But I discovered if you're a miner and you mine the virgin coin, but you don't have this KYC AML risk. It's never been in cybersecurity. So I put up the first 5 million as a co-investor, co-founder, and immediately $30 million came behind it. And it was the first crypto mining company to go public in 2017 when Bitcoin was 6,000 and Ethereum was less than 300. And so it became that sort of growth process. Immediately it was exploded. A lot of the gold investors that follow me, I have about 100,000 readers in 80 countries talking about the world of gold and alternative assets. They use Hive as a proxy to get into Bitcoin because they were afraid of what happened back then at the story of Mt. Gox, before everyone got fried by Sam Bankman-Fried. That sort of journey. And then it was interesting that we first started mining Ethereum in Iceland using geothermal, and we always had a discipline for only renewable energy. And so then we went to Sweden, and we were up to 6% of the global network of mining Ethereum. And then after the first halving, we went into Bitcoin mining by buying facilities in Canada at a great deal. They were no longer profitable with S9s. That's what they had. They didn't redeploy. They didn't upgrade. So we got these assets, 30 megawatts in Quebec, and then to finish out a facility in New Brunswick, which grew to 80 megawatts of electricity. So we became now the biggest beast in Canada in using electricity in mining. We built a beautiful campus on the border of Maine and New Brunswick. So that was sort of that journey. But I got into the crypto mining, so I became the executive chair, and I went on this journey of learning about data centers. So really, Bitcoin mining is about data centers, and data centers for your listeners come in three tiers: tier one, tier two, tier three, and tier one with ASIC chips is about $1 million a megawatt. But tier three is what you need for HPC, high performance computing, and that's $10 million a megawatt. If you go tier four, military style, then you're talking up now $15 million a megawatt. And why is it so expensive? It's because of the redundancies and sometimes the triplication of the backup. And what a lot of people don't realize, and even in the Bitcoin ecosystem, that I see these other miners, we're going to in the AI business. Well, you can't have variable energy. You have to be up all the time. So that means those data centers for AI have backup energy sources. Could be diesel, at battery backup. If you have lithium, there's no scent when you have a lithium battery backup, but there is if you have the traditional lead backup batteries. And are you going to use diesel fuel, or are you going to use natural gas as your backup source of energy? Because they have to be up all the time. What is so fascinating for me on this journey was learning about the four tiers and learning about digital gold, as what Bitcoin really is, and building out. And when we start to grow, in particular in Sweden, we had the crisis of Putin invading Ukraine. The psychology of that sentiment changed around the world, that all of a sudden energy sources went up. New Zealand, why did electricity go up there? This emotional tension of seeing what took place. And to me, it's really quite fascinating to see protectionism of data centers and electricity in Scandinavia, in Canada, all of a sudden anti-Bitcoin mining, because they're concerned not just what banks are saying, but data centers for preservation, for energy, because of Putin's invasion. Well, it's evolved. And we still have some of the legacy mindset of banks where there's oligopolies in Canada and in Sweden, and tax authorities really prejudiced against Bitcoin mining, overtaxation on ASIC chips versus a GPU chip. We still see it, but it's slowly going away as the adoption of Bitcoin grows in countries like Sweden and in Canada. And we went sideways. We were the darling. We exploded in that journey of growing. And one time we were doing $1 million a day when Ethereum was over 3,000 and Bitcoin was on a tear before Celsius and all that meltdown took place. The halving took place, and we had to experience the meltdown and Ethereum leaving proof of work to go to proof of stake. And fortunately, we were green only. And because we were green only, Intel knocked on our door, and we created the first what's called Buzz Miner Intel ASIC chip. And NVIDIA allowed us to go and buy new chips. And we originally had 130,000 AMD special purpose chips, but we were able to buy NVIDIA chips that allowed us to not only do mining altcoins and Ethereum, but to pivot into AI early. So we already had that sort of strategy in place, but we were mining Ethereum. It went away and we had to pivot, and it was faster than we thought. We got our money back on our chips, and we learned a lot about this whole ecosystem. And we were first to go out to put our chips on, rent them by the hour. Whereas most traditional data centers says you go and get an institution to pay you 3 to 5 years, and you do this big onboarding, you have a big sales force, a big technical force. We turn around and basically create it with platforms to go out, and they do the KYC and AML, and we rent our chips by the hour. So that grew to 10,000 counts around the world. And as VCs continue to fund research and development of products, they didn't want to go to the long lockup 3-year contract. So they came and started using Buzzes or Hives. You create this Buzz company for HPC. So we have been growing that business, and we have 2 key people, does about 20 million. We've ordered more H200s, and we know that as they come on stream, our revenue starts to ratchet up. And we expect it to increase from a year from today. Our performance suggests about a 5-fold increase to 100 million in revenue. And that I feel more confident with because Bell Canada has come to us. And Bell Canada was not with NVIDIA, but we are with NVIDIA, and we're a platinum buyer with NVIDIA. And we have a strong relationship because we're green only with NVIDIA. And so with that, we're able to basically bridge the gap between Bell Canada, which is the biggest beast in Canada, to build sovereign data centers only in Canada. And immediately we'll have 4 megawatts in the next 6 months running in Manitoba. We bought our own data center that we're repurposing, converting from tier 1 to tier 3 in Toronto. And Toronto's the biggest city in Canada, but it's also the home for the Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize for Science for AI, Jeffrey Hendon. So you have a university that is populating and producing a lot of PhDs in AI, and that's what you need for future growth. So we're very thrilled about being that. And then we're going to convert 20 of our megawatts in New Brunswick on the border of Maine in stages into high performance computing. So we get to upgrade them. And what's really important is that we can upgrade faster if you already have the infrastructure with a Bitcoin data center. And that's what's happening in America. CoreWeave, the super scalar high performance computing beast, needs electricity. Who do they go after? Core Scientific. So Core Scientific is going to be shutting down their Bitcoin mining operations as they are taken over and they pivot into high performance computing. And that leaves where Hive is still growing its footprint in Paraguay to mine Bitcoin with green energy. And I just came back there.
Wow, that's awesome. And I mean, yeah, that's a lot. That's quite the journey, honestly. And I remember, I mean, one, I think it's really cool that a lot of people who were really interested in gold mining ended up kind of getting into Bitcoin mining. They hear this like, there's new digital gold. I think the terminology that Satoshi used to describe it was so smart to get people interested in this thing and create a parallel to things that people already understand. And I also do definitely remember the time when you guys were pushing hard on the Ethereum mining, and I actually really like that about you guys, that you guys had this kind of like dual strategy and we could get some like Ethereum miners in there. But I also remember when the proof of stake stuff started happening, I was like, man, that's got to be such a nightmare for you guys to have to deal with. It's out of your control what's happening to the broader network. You've made big investments in this, and now, they're just kind of like pulling the rug out from under you and kind of, screwing the people who were making the network possible, which I thought was kind of a raw deal for you guys. But the fact that you were able to like pivot out of it in such an effective way, I was really impressed by just like how quickly you guys were able to swing with the punches. Was that like a difficult time for you guys? Were you like watching all these votes and
It's a triple event. Celsius went under, proof of Ethereum left proof of work, and then Bankman fried the global industry. And that all happened from the summer to the fall. And that was a tough time. But you know what I'm really blessed with? And thank you for all your wonderful encouragement and compliments, is that we have the longest standing CEO and CFO in the industry. The turmoil has been incredible. And we've been steady. We also have the lowest G&A to mine a Bitcoin. We run the place very frugally, but every employee gets RSUs. Everyone gets to participate in this growth. And so I think what's really important is that even during those quarters, we had operating income. Other people had big losses. A couple went bankrupt. We never did that. And it's because we're lean. The royalty model I started off with at the beginning, explaining that we don't have lots of people to lay off. We don't have that. And we're able to adapt to and pivot more fluidly. And it's stressful and painful, like for everyone. But because we don't have so many people like some of our peers have, that we don't want to have silos. We like to call ourselves the Navy SEALs of the industry, where everyone has basically three job titles and everyone has to be a road warrior. If you're not a road warrior, you get less RSUs. It's really simple. And when we give out RSUs, you don't get the chance to exercise it for a year out. So means you have to be aligned with the existing shareholders. You're not getting a bunch of quick stock options and blowing the stock out like other people have. You cannot exercise them. So we don't give a big batch of them every quarter. We give out and make sure that everyone's focused for the next year. So we don't get the turnover of the core people that our peers have. So I believe that it's allowed us to weather these external unexpected earthquakes that happen or tsunamis of regulations that come through. And so that's where we are.
And I mean, I respect it. It's not an easy business to run. You have to deal with all of these cycles, all the uncertainty, the regulations, you're building things no one else has and creating business models that no one else has really tested out yet. And so I have a huge amount of respect for being able to, do as well as you
Well,
have
you
for
were a
this
miner.
long.
You were early. You understand how friggin' tough it is. It's
100%. You're dealing with energy costs. You're dealing with needing new equipment all the time, where all of a sudden all this investment you've just made is, 1/10 as valuable as the output decreases. And there's a lot of like math and infrastructure, and you need to kind of be a polymath in all of these ways to understand how to do it effectively. And I think it was what I found is tough with the industry in particular is you have these cyclical markets where at the top of the market you kind of have this like huge incentive to create liquidity events and like sell some shares to go buy more equipment so that you're better prepared going forward so that you can continue to scale. And I think finding that balance has been very difficult where investors stay happy. I think like Mara and Riot have done a really bad job of that. Every time I'm like, okay, you guys are in the best spot ever, then they just create a huge liquidity event and create a bunch more shares, and it gets very difficult. So I guess I'm curious, like how your experience has been dealing with the ups and downs of the market, understanding when do we hold the Bitcoin, when do we sell it, when do we use these other vehicles to raise the money we might need to expand. How aggressively do we expand? Do we just try to buy every miner in existence and become the biggest ever, or do we want the slow and steady path to gradually scale up? I guess what's been your philosophy around that?
well, I've been lived through so many gold cycles and seen so many market crashes, and recognize that you've got to be very careful with debt when you have a highly volatile asset class because they're the ones that go under, and we've seen that. So a lot of these predator lenders we've stayed away from when we've been able to orchestrate using an ATM. But when we use it, it's got to have a higher return on invested capital. So we can show that our revenue this year grew by 65% per share. We issued shares, but the revenue growth is 65% per share year over year. I think that's pretty impressive. And so that's a discipline we have. And the other part was going to Paraguay. That whole journey to me was like, I'm frustrated. I can't grow. Will Trump win, and will he come into the House and change? And now we have the Genius Act, which is great wind at your sail. But last summer we had Biden, and it was still anti-Bitcoin, and so we never did anything in America. But when all that changed, we moved our head office here. We have done some other pivotal changes, but I was desperate really to find electrical hydroelectricity. And the opportunity was, hey, Paraguay. And I reached out and talked to the president. So I flew down to meet the president, took our chief operating officer and general counsel, president of Sweden, and we toured around, we located a property, and we started. And what's interesting is during this journey of getting positioned to grow in Paraguay, foolish thing happens. They increase a tariff tax on Bitcoin miners. So companies like Bitfarms had gone through loss of CEO, hire a new CEO, Riot trying to take them over, hostile, all this turmoil, new CEO, he wants a new strategy. And and that became our opportunity. He wants to leave the country. He wants to focus in America, which is fine. That's his strategy. And now he has more clarity because Trump is the president. So he does a stronghold deal, and they'll grow, and they have a gigawatt of electricity, is what they believe they can unlock in America. We say we only want to be green, and so therefore we're able to fast track our growth. So we've gone from 6 exahash this year to 18, on path by American Thanksgiving to 25. It's the biggest growth of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and it's showing up that our year end is March, and we did 110 million approximately in revenue, when we still eked out with the halving of operating income of 25 million. That's not bad. during all that difficulty, and our EBITDA was like $57 million. And most of the companies are compared on their EBITDA basis. So for us, we were really happy what we were able to do, and we had a growth in front of us, but it wasn't really going to start coming on stream until now, till Thanksgiving, as you're building out. And Bitfarms wants to get out, so we cut a deal to buy them. And we bought their assets and then fast tracked at a great price to be able to accelerate that growth. And so now we're getting margin expansion. So you have the same nucleus of people, but you're producing now $1 million a day of Bitcoin. And by Thanksgiving, where Bitcoin is priced today and the difficulty is today, we'll be at $1.3 million a day. And so that's excluding the growth in the high performance computing. That's gone from 10 million to 20 million. And with the recent acquisitions and expansion, this time next year we'll be at 100 million of high performance computing, and that will throw off EBITDA of $50 to $60 million. The Bitcoin mining operations, we should have EBITDA based on all the performance of 250 million in EBITDA. So collectively, it'll be at 300 million in EBITDA. If you look at just the data center business, tier one, tier two, they trade at and 3 up to 20 times EBITDA. We saw CoreWeave go to take over Core Scientific at a close to 15 times EBITDA. So if you put a value of 10 times EBITDA on Hive, that allows the imagination to say 3 billion. And that means the stock has potential for $10 to $12. And that's why a lot of analysts are calling that $10 to $12. That's where it comes from. It's just a logical thought process. And I think that we're going to see Bitcoin miners who have stable electricity, not variable. Variable you can't really do it. Stable. They're going to get bought out by the hyperscalers, and there's going to be deals done. And we've seen that TeraWulf has been on a tear. A big part of that is because of a hyperscaler. And that was 18 months of relationship building and negotiating. So we do see those changes. And the other big part happened almost 2 years ago when AWS went and spent, I think, $650 million to get 950 megawatts of nuclear energy. That automatically stopped the greenies going anti-nuclear, and all of a sudden nuclear was cool and we better get nuclear. And that relates to TeraWulf. So nuclear is now not a bad word. It's a good word. And there's more newer technology that Bill Gates has spent money on, modular, more updated nuclear reactors. And South Korea is coming out with these modular nuclear reactors. So I think the use of energy is only going to grow. And I think the value of data centers is going to grow. And the three factors is, one, you need to get the electricity. Two, you have to get the land. And if you're going to get in Bitcoin mining, you have to be under 5 cents. The next halving, unless you have even more efficient machines, your history. So you have to recognize that, and you have to have a path that allows you to go into HPC. And in Paraguay, Secretary of State said the country should, go into HPC. And so they're all keen about that. But here's the risk, is it's really expensive. Cambridge University 6 months ago came out with a study that is 33 to 1 to go into GPU chips and tier 3 compute than it is to Bitcoin mining. So if you have 100 megawatts, you're talking about $3.3 billion. That's serious ka-ching versus 100 megawatts, and we're spending $100 million getting 100 million in revenue with Bitcoin mining. But I think one of the things is that we went to Paraguay, I mentioned earlier, met the president. Here's what blew me away. You just don't realize an incredible alliance with America. They love America. And you say, well, why? It's because America protected the country in 1870. There was genocide where Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay tried to take over the country of Paraguay, and America solved the problem. And the biggest state in the country is called President Hayes. And the biggest minority that's there are Mennonites. There's 40,000 Mennonites that have made
Wow, didn't know that.
basically desert a rich agricultural area. And because President Hayes had protected that they owned their land, they lost some along the borders to Argentina, but they basically, Paraguayans recognized November the 12th as Hayes Day. And they are aligned with America for Taiwan. They are aligned with America with Israel. They are not anti like China tries to promote. And the young president's 47 years old with charm and charisma at another level, that studied in America, went to the University of Columbia in New York City, and worked at the World Bank, goes back, becomes the president, and he gets them to a government, a high international rating for their bonds. Their GDP is growing at 5%. They have the largest dam in the Western Hemisphere in partnership with Brazil, 10 gigawatts, 5 for Paraguay, 5 for Brazil. They were selling some of this electricity to Argentina that had no pay, that screwed up their utility companies' fiscal policies and the government. Guess what? Bitcoin miners pay every month. We are incredibly beneficial to the country in having a stable fiscal policy. And so we play another role of building out their infrastructure, laying the tracks for down the road going into high performance AI compute. So we're excited being part of that. And we see that we could have potential a gigawatt of electricity in that country.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love what you said just about how energy is changing. You know, you have to pay attention to, are they creating these like smaller, more efficient nuclear reactors? I was just 2 days ago, I was at Andreessen Horowitz's office, and they had the guy who they invested in who's creating fusion reactors right now. He's working at Los Alamos with those guys, working on fusion energy. And it's like, what would that unlock with something like this? And so the next 10 years, the whole environment will probably be drastically different.
You know the big question there in quantum compute? Ask how much electricity they suck.
Yeah.
Holy jumping.
Yep.
You need a bigger pipe for high performance computing than you do Bitcoin mining. And you need a bigger fiber optics, dense, dark fiber optics to take the data out. But the energy, when we plug in or an ASIC chip arrives at the door, it's 6 hours to unwrap, plug in, cash flow. When NVIDIA's H200s arrive, it's 6 weeks before they're plugged in because you're building a brain and you have all the special cables. And I try to explain to people that when you look at cars, you love cars. Well, ASIC chips are Broncos and Jeeps. When you go GPU chips NVIDIA, you're talking Porsches, Ferraris, and Bugattis. So you talk a Blackwell cluster, that's Bugatti time. When you have a shipment moving, you need armed security because it's worth more than gold and it's more portable. We have in front armed guards, in behind and in front to protect when we're moving our chips into a facility. So it's another world which you just don't think of. That even now ASIC chips are costing 4,000. We get the H200s, it's 40,000. So you've got this little thing that, as you know, it is like a tiny thing here, and you're paying $40,000 for, and people steal them to turn around and sell it on a black market. It's more portable to go do that, so you have to be really on guard. with great surveillance and systems nowadays. So I think it's another world when I look at tier one, two, and three.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess my question, I would love to know, like, what's been your experience working with the chip providers like Bitmain when you're competing against all these, massive other mining operations and you guys are all fighting for, the newest, best hardware and, what's that look like? Has it been easy to just get what you need? Has it been something you have to really build relationships for? Have there
You
been
know,
frustrations getting?
I would share with you that Bitmain at first was difficult. They were unreliable, delivering machines on time. This was just after the first halving, and we bought the assets in Lachute. But today, it's A plus. I mean, it's A plus. Their flexibility, their innovation. We didn't want to sell our Bitcoin. We didn't want to go and borrow at 9% by pledging at Coinbase. So we had a structured deal with them that we posted our Bitcoin with the right to buy them back at $87,000, and they provided $150 million worth of chips.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it wasn't a cash out of our pocket. There was no interest cost, and we try to stay as hush as possible for that because our peers, they copy what we're doing, and we're very aware of that. And so we have to be sensitive and let them go and figure it out. My job isn't to make their job easy. It's for my shareholders. That's who I'm obligated to. And so that's what Bitmain has been so helpful that way. Uh, and having Bitmain equipment in Paraguay, the tariffs, all the tariff stuff that's hurting some of the other crypto mining here. Like some of the companies I heard, they have a $175 million American tariff tax problem they didn't expect. And Bitmain's trying to cleanse themselves all the time in Washington. But it's really America's deeply, deeply concerned about China's under Xi Jinping undermining democracy, supporting dictators all over the world. Whenever you want to take their money, what they did in Ecuador was bad infrastructure. The country has just got into a real difficult bind. What they've done is that you have to stop all relationships with Taiwan. You have to stop you have to basically follow their path. And over 100 countries have borrowed money. I know in Paraguay, they send in Chinese workers. And I'm told they're like prison, and I don't know, but I know that in Africa. But they basically build a military compound, and they don't hire locals. And I've shared that with the government, and they're very sensitive over that now. But that's what we've seen where they are. And the same thing, I experienced this in my gold mining days. I'm talking about pre 2008, going into East Africa, seeing where the Chinese brought in all their workers and they didn't hire the locals. And so, therefore, how do they extract the metal and they send it back to China? So that really isn't helping overall job creation, which they want. In Paraguay, we created 300 construction jobs. 300. The Chinese data center, nothing. So now after that, they have some workers that are doing security, but we have 40 young engineers that didn't have a job opportunity. Our business there hired them, and we treat that as a separate entity that's managed by the core up here out of Vancouver, and and so we are now really important for educated young engineers an opportunity to grow in what we're doing. The other thing I know from my gold mining experience in Latin America and Africa is that the central governments tax you, but not that much money comes back to the site of the gold mine. So the locals get upset. And the same thing happens with Bitcoin mining. In Boden, Sweden, we turned around and funded 12 kids' hockey teams. Why hockey? Because they have three superstars and won Stanley Cups from the area. They're heroes of the area. And hockey's the number one sport. In Latin America, it's soccer. And you just realize that for parents, etc., we're funding those 12 teams and we're funding the hockey arena. So we're helping overall the community. And we've also helped education for gamers. People want to code for gaming, and that's where Minecraft comes from. So we're helping with that in Sweden. And what we did in Paraguay is within a kilometer around us to put air conditioning in all the kids' schools and upgrade with new chalkboards, new this, new that, as part of the overall look at capitalism in a positive way. Look at what young engineers, you too, as a poor kid from a rural area, you could become an engineer. Create that hope that America does so well. So that is what we've been doing as part of our strategy in Latin America. But I must admit, I learned that from my gold mining industry days.
That's awesome. No, I think, and that's so important because even when I was living in Texas, the big Bitcoin mining operations would go up and people would complain. They'd say, "Oh, I think my power," they'd blame everything on it. They'd be, "Oh, the power's out. It's that Bitcoin mining guys." And it kind of gave Bitcoin a bad name. People are like, "Oh, it's just getting in the way." And I think being able to reframe it as like, look, this is like a positive impact on the economy. Look at all the jobs we can create. And generally, like, that has a big impact just on how people view the entire industry, and you guys are kind of at the front of it. So a lot of us are relying on how you represent us to the average person, and so I think it's really important to have programs like that, and that's how you onboard the next generation and get them comfortable with what's going on. So I think that's amazing. So my last question for you, I think here would be, now we're entering a time where regulations are changing. There are a lot more companies that are getting listed publicly. I know that, like, one reason I really like investing in Bitcoin mining companies was it was, a proxy for Bitcoin, and a lot of times it would follow the pumps and dumps, and it was a way to get exposure through options and, through my traditional brokerages, um, to Bitcoin when I wasn't just trading spot and couldn't trade perpetuals and things like that. And so I'm curious if you've noticed like a difference in the type of investor that you have, if some of those investors, maybe are just going more towards the ETF products that might be available. And if maybe you're seeing more of like the larger like pension funds and stuff coming in who might be now reallocating into, Bitcoin related products and treating it more as like a very much a part of the industry as opposed to like a proxy for the industry. Because I know a lot of people were worried that, once there is so much availability of Bitcoin related products, now you guys do have more competition with investors, but if there's a lot more investor money coming to the table looking for a place to go, then that's not necessarily the case if that is balanced out. So I'm curious if you've seen, an inflow of that new money coming in and different types of investors and how that's sort of changed over time.
Now, it's so fast, and we know we're in an adoption cycle, and we know that there's a big push by Michael Saylor with 4.5 million followers on Twitter that Bitcoin mining is not a good industry. Just buy Bitcoin and put it in your balance sheet. And there's this big promotion for that. And there's flawed because you need to have Bitcoin miners to validate the industry. And you need that infrastructure that is decentralized around the world. And if you don't have that, then you're going to get a concentration of Bitcoin, and basically 51 makes it easy. That we noticed that when we started mining altcoins using AI with our NVIDIA chips, we would look at the margins, we were huge returns. We couldn't sell them because we're so big. That all of a sudden you would break the 51 rule and more than 51%. And so we had to tool back. In Ethereum Classic, we were making a ton of money on Ethereum Classic, but we had to be so careful that we could never take our fleet of GPU chips. We would crush the market or break the value of it as being a decentralized coin. And so I think the same thing can happen if everyone just hodls Bitcoin and there's no real global network that is facilitating, validating the transaction, that you're going to get into that difficulty. So I think that's just a short-term greed. Get as much Bitcoin in your balance sheet, and we have witnessed where Hive has been pressured last year and down with these guys shorting because Riot does a financing and CleanSpark does a debt financing. Well, the guys that buy those are shorting anything that's crypto. So all of a sudden they're shorting Hive, and so that they can do this financing to buy more Bitcoin. That is just what blows me away. And then I don't know if you follow that. The numbers were really amazing to me. I say we trade $5 billion a day of all the crypto mining companies, and they're doing 5 billion in 3 days of these debt fundings. Well, that means they're selling the short. There's a huge short position on Marathon and on Riot, and they have to buy and cover. But what happens is for us is that all of a sudden they're shorting us. And we're not going down that path. We have a complete different, we're green only. And we have a different sort of thought process of how we're building the business. And so I see that it's not just putting on your balance sheet. I believe it's better if you go and mine it and put on your balance sheet, because that means you're only going to make decisions that have higher returns on invested capital. Raising capital to short the stock. I don't know if you follow some of these deals. 25% are buying back the stock. They're not really buying back the stock. It's for the hedge funds are shorting against. It's really not a
Yeah.
stock. It's bizarre, but it's because the size of the deal is too big for them. They don't have enough stocks to short against, and they can easily borrow out of these ETFs. And a lot of these other companies that went into the Russell 2000, the fees are so low at Vanguard's and Fidelity's ETFs, they make their money from securities lending. So it's very easy. They make more money on securities lending than they make on their management fee. And so these operations are easy to lend out. And then there's where the shorting takes place. But the size of the deals were bigger than the trading volume necessary to create a balanced market. And that's what we found. That's not our path, and that's other people's path.
No, and that's why I liked Hive, because you could tell on the chart that stuff is happening, and it just never feels like you have an edge. Someone's borrowing, playing a game that you can't play at that scale. And I think the way you guys have done it is the way to do it, and I really have a lot of respect for that. And I guess one very last question I have for you. So one thing I worked on very early on 2016 was trying to create like consumer facing mining products. So actually like getting miners in people's homes and increasing the decentralization of mining, because you do have Riot and Mara who are inching close to getting enough network hash that they become a real threat to the network if they get bought out by some investors. Chinese decide they want to buy out majority share and now they want to control the network. You have a big problem on your hands if they continue to consolidate. Which is why I think it's really important that we have multiple mining companies. And I think you will always need large scale mining companies. But I'm curious if you've ever, explored the idea of like making it more consumer focused. People are putting jacuzzis with Bitcoin miners, or it's powering your jacuzzi and heating it up, or your homes. I know people have built it into their homes for heating. And I think it's really exciting to see where maybe there can be a world where people can have some of these in their house. It's something that's so tangible. They look at the box, they say, that thing gives me Bitcoin if I plug it in. And it's just not easy enough for most people to set up or to utilize. But even, a lot of the wealthy investors I talk to, they've desperate for me to go set up like a personal mining operation in their house out in the hills and just have it going all the time. But there is you don't want to burn down their house either. You got to do it right. So I'm curious if that's ever something you've explored or been interested in.
One of the chips for mining is script for mining Dogecoin. They've been very popular because they're small and you can use your house electricity, like heating, like charging your Tesla. And they were at the Bitcoin mining conference in Las Vegas, and it was interesting. They don't have many machines, like there's a backlog for them. because not Bitcoin mining, but for those only. The Bitcoin is so competitive with ASIC chips and energy is so critical. I think that lends itself more difficult to be putting in your homes. I know early you could do that, but today to get a piece of that action, you need to have so much horsepower. But what you can do, and what we've done, is that we heat a building in Lachute. It's about 40,000 square feet. And it heats a building 200,000 square feet with 175 workers making whirlpools. And it's basically a liquid that goes across a radiator system. In the winter, it saves them $300,000 a year. So I found out that for the Olympics in Paris, that they were for altcoins, and they had built mining there, and they used the heat to heat the pool. So you can go and heat, especially electric Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's a great idea. Or hockey arenas that you go in and do that. You create a Bitcoin system to heat the arena, and that can save them $250,000 a year in heating bills, because you need about a megawatt of electricity, and you can get facilities, modular facilities that are for 1 megawatt, 2.5 megawatts, etc. So I think that idea for a lot of schools, especially in the northern states of across America, where you can put these small units in and you get your money back. The other part is that you blow out a lot of heat, as you know how strong the fans are. When you get the mega size, that you have like 100 megawatts and those facilities, so you have you can create where you're drying rice. So today they have usually natural gas, and they have big expensive dryers for the various rapeseed, etc. Before shipping around the world on bulk, they dry it. So you could put a Bitcoin data center there, modular unit, and reconfigure with engineering to dry that way. And therefore,
That's
you're
amazing.
actually
Yeah.
making money from the same molecule of electricity.
Yeah, and I even met a guy who's doing oil fields in Texas, taking the natural gas that's burning off, putting that into miners, and so you can create all these crazy loops where you're solving like three, four problems at the same time.
Uh,
Yeah.
and we see that when you think of Abilene, Texas, you think of Roy Orbison and all the songs, Sweet Abilene. Uh, Here's a place where the big oil companies built biggest wind farms in the world, solar panels everywhere. So they have wind energy, solar energy, which is really good during the day, but not nighttime as steady. And they have flare gas. So that becomes Bitcoin miners' dream. They're the first to go there. They're the first and the best to find stranded electricity anywhere in the world, and to create the infrastructure around to convert that other form of energy into electricity to mine for Bitcoin. Now, Abilene has a $500 billion spend. It's the biggest infrastructure spend in America. Who were the pioneers? Bitcoin miners built that
Wow.
basic infrastructure. And that's what something that should be very proud of, that the world doesn't realize that things come in stages. The whole creation of AI from a GPU chip actually comes from gamers. The GeForce, the GF Force NVIDIA chip was for gamers. And it was young gamers that became the coders. And it was the coders, and then they kept making stronger chips and stronger chips, that all of a sudden it unlocks the AI boom. It's gamers. And when I was doing the research for Bitcoin mining, 91 was when two scientists from Berkeley University working for Bell Labs created blockchain. And it basically is dormant, but it was for telecom companies to be able to move an asset, and if anyone tampered with it, it got locked down. And it lay dormant, and then along comes Napster, which validates peer-to-peer and decentralized. And someone then discovers, oh, I can't stand all the spam, and Adam Beck comes out with an encryption to turn around to try to stop spam. And then you have this first smart contract created that's bit gold, but it's really not evolved to where Bitcoin is. And Bitcoin's not around yet. And then in 2001 comes the Department of Defense and DARPA creates a SHA 256. That was icing on the cake. That is what you use for your iPhone for facial recognition. Some genius called Satoshi puts them all together. He layers one on top of the other, and that is what they call the complex adaptive system. The complex adaptive system says something new evolves. The evolution of a new virus, the evolution of a new plant or species that's resilient. And we see that in Jurassic Park. They're always trying to go create a new dinosaur and cross-pollination that has all these attributes that no one ever thought of. That's what they call complex adaptive systems. And Bitcoin is part of that. And that makes it the most significant component of fintech. So it is the biggest, it's the most important spoke on that wheel for the fintech industry. And that to me, what I've learned about 2 weeks ago going to New York and seeing Japanese investment bankings, and they don't have a Bitcoin mining analyst. It's a fintech analyst. And they're raising all this money doing $500 million ATMs and doing debt lending against data centers and not at high expenses, et cetera. And I'm scratching my head. They said, oh, yeah, to them, Bitcoin is a key element of which is much bigger fintech.
Wow, that was a beautiful summary. Honestly, that was perfect. I love that timeline. Well, thank you so much. This episode
Thank you,
has
my
been
friend.
amazing. I really, really enjoyed this. Is there anything you'd like our viewers to check out? Maybe a website or
Yeah,
any
please
news
go.
or
You got to check out Hive. I mean, we trade. It's really simple math, as I try to walk through earlier, of a takeover. And I don't expect to be taken over, but they're going to have to be done at 14, 15 times EBITDA. And what does that make your company worth? I think we're going to see Bitcoin mining go through a transition that they start getting higher multiples when you look at telecom data centers are valued at 20 times EBITDA. Yeah. So I think that a re-rating is going to take place. And everywhere, wherever we are, we want the stable hydroelectricity.
I believe it. And you guys have always been one of my favorite miners. Well,
Well,
you are
thank
my
you for all
favorite
your
public
kind
miner, honestly.
support and encouragement.
Absolutely. No, you guys have been doing a great job, and I really respect what you guys have done for the industry. So thank you again. I appreciate it, and thank you all for listening. We'll be back with another episode soon.
And stay long.
Stay long.